Welcome to this week's edition of Black Authors Matter TV, where we interview the latest movers and shakers in the African American literary community. You'll meet some old friends, discover new ones, and stay abreast of the latest book developments around the country and even the world. So sit back and relax for the next 2 hours with Black Authors Matter TV co-hosts Gwen Richardson and Dr. Rhonda Lawson.
Good evening. Welcome to Black Authors Matter TV. I'm Gwen Richardson, your host for tonight, along with my co-host,
Dr. Rhonda Lawson. Good evening, everyone.
And I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday, and I hope you all are also being prepared for Christmas, doing all of your shopping, making wise choices, and getting ahead of everything. So, and not waiting to the last minute.
Like me.
So anyway, we are excited about tonight's show, like we always are. And before we get started with the show, we have a video about the show we're going to show. And we want people who are new to the show to know a little bit more about it, and the people who see it all the time, so they'll learn some things that maybe they didn't know. So anyway, we're playing the video first, then we'll get right into the show.
Since the Black Authors Matter TV live stream show and podcast launched in July 2020, it's been regarded as the platform of record for African American literature. Co-hosted by literary influencers Gwen Richardson and Dr. Rhonda Lawson, the show averages 3,000 viewers and listeners every week. Every Tuesday, we interview a variety of movers and shakers in the literary world, including celebrities and media commentators, NAACP Image Award nominees and winners, historians, agents and marketing professionals, publishers, bookstore owners from coast to coast, book club facilitators, online book groups and book chats, book event coordinators, literary nonprofit organizations and projects, and, in some cases, Black Authors Matter TV has conducted one of the last interviews prior to a literary influencer's transition. In fact, since the show's inception 3 years ago, Black Authors Matter TV has interviewed more than 500 guests, and the list continues to grow. Engaging, relatable, timely, and, most of all, committed to excellence. Black Authors Matter TV continues to bring viewers the latest book industry news and new releases, and will continue to do so for years to come.
Okay, so we hope you enjoyed that video. It gave you an encapsulation of the 3 years, well, 3.5 almost now, since we launched Black Authors Matter TV. And I have a couple of announcements, then we're going to bring on our first guest. For those of you all who missed or went to the National Black Book Festival last month, we've been posting photos for the last 3 weeks, and we still have a lot more to post because we had about 500 photos and videos that we had to go through. And so we have really some good footage of everything that went on for the weekend. So continue to check our Facebook and Instagram pages so you can see the videos from this year. And if you're planning to attend the 2024 Book Festival, the dates are October 17th through the 19th. Registration opens January 1st. And the early bird period is when you get the most favorable rate and terms, and it lasts from January 1st to March 31st. So you still have some time. And we also allow people to make payments on their registration tables for the authors who are there. So it's very, very easy to sign up, very affordable, very it helps you fit within your budget. So we have one book we're going to be giving away later in the show, but for now, we're going to bring on our first guest. And for those of you all who watch the show, you know that we have a lot of authors from Black Odyssey Media. That's the new imprint that Entice has, where she has engineered her her company to where I think this year she had 8 releases, and next year she's doubling that. So the guest who's on tonight, who's J.L. Campbell, and she was on, but then she went away. So maybe she'll sign back on. She was there.
She said, never mind.
So she is her book is being was released today. It's called Flames of Wrath, and she is signed with Black Odyssey Media. So we are excited to have another Black Odyssey Media author on Black Authors Matter TV. So as soon as she brings herself on camera and with the audio, we'll welcome her. Welcome to Black Authors Matter TV.
We thought you changed your mind about being on the show.
No, I technology always does funny things. So I just thought that, it was my internet or something, and they logged me off and then I came back on. So I'm sorry.
So are you joining us from the West Indies, from Jamaica?
Yes, I'm in Jamaica.
Wonderful.
Which part of Jamaica?
I am in Saint Catherine. It's one parish over from the capital city.
Oh, nice.
Okay. I haven't been to that part of Jamaica, but I've been to several other parts of Jamaica.
Believe it or not, I've never been to Jamaica. People are always surprised because I've been so many places, but Jamaica is not one of them, unfortunately.
Well, I'm going to cruise so you can go.
Exactly, I will.
That's how most people go, because that's I think the 4 or 5 times I've been, it was on cruises. So
okay,
it's very, very, very nice, and the people are very nice, very friendly. So you go by JL, and so congratulations on your book release day, which is today, from what I understand.
Yes.
And do you have a copy of your book with you?
Of course.
Okay. And it's called Flames of Wrath.
Very intriguing title.
Yeah, and it's making me wonder if it's about, that scene in Waiting to Exhale where Angela Bassett burns her husband's things and his car. That's what it reminds me of. And I know you do romantic suspense, and there's a thin line between love and hate. So
absolutely,
there is.
So tell us about Flames of Wrath.
Okay, Flames of Wrath kicks off in Jamaica, and Geneva Layton's daughter, Alexia, is here on spring break with a group of friends. And in a moment, things go wrong and they turn on her and they put her in the hospital.
Oh,
and her mother flies in. Her mother is a cybersecurity expert, so she knows everything about computers, technology, and making it work for her. And she tracks all of the persons who had a hand in hurting her daughter, and she makes them pay.
Oh my. Okay, yeah, I have to read that. Yeah, speaking of the premise of your story, it's like it's ripped out of the headlines.
Yes.
Because that happened to the young lady who went to Mexico with her friends, or they were supposedly her friends, and they wound up killing her and then trying to cover it up. So when you talked about your story, that's what popped into my mind. So it's did you realize how timely your story would be?
That's amazing, because I started this journey with Black Odyssey in 2021, late 2021. And I was writing the story, and the story had already been written when, what happened to the young lady in Mexico. It really struck a chord with me, that these things actually happen.
Yes.
So yeah, it does kind of feel like it's been ripped from the headlines.
Right. You wonder if when people go on these trips and then things go terribly wrong, are they just acquaintances? I'm wondering, are they really your friends? Are they just people you just met and you decide to go out of town with them? I just wonder how it spirals out of control to where it gets to that level.
Yes. You know, my husband, he watches MSNBC like every night, as if we live in America and so on. But he claims that everything that happens in America affects us. And so I see so many different things, so many different instances of people seemingly just going mad in a moment. And it seems as if when we're in a mob or in a group of people, we forget who we are and we're like sheep. So we just go with the flow of the crowd. You know, we forget our morals, we forget any loyalty, and we just do stuff in the moment. And it really makes you wonder.
It does. As far as I can recall, I don't think I've ever been in a mob to do anything.
I've never had the mind to kill somebody. Now I've been upset with people. I've been very upset with people, but I've never plotted a person's murder or even just put him in the hospital. So you do wonder what goes through a person's mind, you know?
Right. To get to that point, it had to be something already there in their personality.
True. It takes a certain time.
It does. And because in a situation like that, you would think that somebody in the group would say, hey guys, you know, let's
this is going too far. Yeah.
This is going too far. And but it does happen. And not necessarily just on trips, just like recently here. And if your husband watches MSNBC, he probably saw this story. I forgot where, I think it was in Las Vegas, where a teenage boy was defending another boy against some bullies.
Yeah.
And a group of about 10 or 12 kids kicked him to death.
Whoa.
You just wonder how does that happen? I'm baffled by it.
So when you were creating your characters and you were putting this story together, what helped you to get into the minds of the people who did this? Did you read case studies or had you seen other stories like this? How do you get into the mind of a killer, basically?
It's weird, but writers tend to go, you have to get into the head of the characters, basically. You do have to. And so I don't know how come we don't have mental issues, you know, leaping from one personality to the other. But I didn't do any case studies or anything like that. I brainstormed with my son, who I've since asked not to get into a life of crime. But it's basically just putting myself in the position of the victim, putting myself in the position of the parent, putting myself in the position of like someone who in a moment kind of does something that's just unthinkable.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm like all over the place in terms of being in this character's head. And then there are people who have motivations. I've given everybody some kind of motivation. Like one of the kids, he was just doing it he was peddling drugs because he wanted to be in the cool crowd. You know, his parents could not afford certain things. And so he wanted to be on the inside. And, you know, that was his motivation. There are other people, they're just privileged. And they believe they can do anything and they can get away with it. And we know we have those types of people. So, you know, it was an interesting experience.
Okay. So is this your debut novel?
No, actually, you know, I've written 40 odd books, but it is the first time that I have written a thriller. And that was such an interesting happening because I had pitched something to Black Odyssey and they were interested in something else. And Shawanda in our conversation encouraged me, well, what about trying, you know, a thriller, you know? And I said, okay, let me think about that. And I came up with the idea, came up with a synopsis, and I sent it to her. And yeah, they liked the idea. And so, you know, we moved on from there.
Oh, okay. Now, you said you have 40 books?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. You know, is it under
She's been around for a minute.
Yeah, that's what I thought I had seen the name before, but then, you know, a lot of the books that Entice is releasing with Black Odyssey their debut novel. So now your other books, are they romance? Is that what it is?
You see, the thing with me is that I write all over the place. So I write sweet romance, I write romantic suspense, I write women's fiction. I'm kind of all over the place as a writer. It's not a good thing. It works for some people, and for some people it doesn't, in that you want to niche down and sort of build your career in, and be an expert in this thing. But with
it sounds
me,
like you have different audiences. You have an audience for each of your genres that you're writing for.
And what is interesting is that people follow me. So if I'm writing sweet romance, they will buy those books. And if I'm writing romantic suspense, they will buy those books too. So it's, for me, it has not been anything of a disadvantage.
Do you have a favorite genre?
I like romantic suspense. I really do. It's where I started. It's what I like to read. So yeah, I like romantic suspense.
Nice. Okay, so in this book, where's the romantic part?
Actually, in Flames of Wrath, they're having the mother and the father are having issues. They're having issues because the father, he stepped out on her. It's not something that's accepted, but she loves this man. She really does. And she's not a forgiving person. And we see that in how she goes about getting revenge on the people who have hurt her daughter. But she has a very, very soft spot for her husband of so many years. And they managed to work it out. They managed to work things out. So that's the romantic part. Although he does have a time, reining her in.
I can see that. She's caught up in wanting to get that revenge.
Mm-hmm. So when did you first start releasing books?
It was I got the first contract which was a romantic suspense, by the way, in 2009. And that book, Contraband, my first book, was released in 2010. And Hardware came that same year as well with another publisher. And in 2011, I decided to self-publish, because then it was just, becoming the thing to do. And since then, I've had a few other contracts, but for the most part, I've been self-publishing.
Okay, so how do you, so it's sort of like a hybrid, which a lot of people are doing that now. Mm-hmm. So tell the audience about your experience being self-published versus having a contract with the publisher. Like, what are the pros and cons from your vantage point of each one? Okay. Because a lot of people think that it's nirvana when you sign with the publisher, and they think,
you know what you're getting into,
and you'll be on easy street, and you'll be, on the road to millions. A lot of people think that.
Yeah, so, I had a rude awakening when I first published when I was first published, because I somehow thought, in a dream world, in a perfect world, that the publisher would do everything. And then I learned that I'd have to start a blog, I'd have to start a newsletter, I'd have to actually do some promoting, I'd actually have to do advertising and so on. So it was not as wonderful as I thought it would be. But on the other hand, they do the cover, they do the editing, so you don't have that expense to deal with. And from that perspective, I liked that. And just the opportunity to be published, because people tend to not look down on you, but they don't, because everybody is able to publish. So people believe that, hey, well, self-publishing, it can't be that good a book. I do not believe that, because I have read some very good, half of what I read is self-published. So I know that there are awesome writers out there who are self-publishing.
Well, there are great writers who are self-published. And I often tell people, when they're trying to decide between self-published or traditional publishing, you have to go with the route that's going to be right for you.
Right.
For instance, I know an author who hates Amazon. He refuses to sell his books on Amazon. And I said, I understand what you're saying, but the way my schedule is set up, every time somebody decides to order one of my books, I don't have time to go to the mailbox. I can't mail all of these books myself. I need a distribution system, basically. So
Right.
I don't mind using Amazon or self-publishing. And also with self-publishing, I can publish at my pace
Right.
and not the publisher's pace. When the publisher says he wants the book by a certain date, that's what you're going to be doing. You're going to be getting that book done by that date. But when you're self-published, you set your own schedule. So it just kind of depends on you. What is your schedule? How much are you willing to hustle? And don't think the hustle stops just because you have a traditional publisher.
It does
And
not.
that's the other part about it.
And some people, and I, I'm not a huge Amazon fan, but I have to accept the real world.
Right.
And people I did an informal survey on my Facebook page a couple of weeks ago, or it might have been more than a couple. But anyway, I wanted to know where people had bought their last book, just to see how dominant Amazon, or not, how dominant Amazon was. And most of the people on my page are either authors or readers or both, or publishers. A lot of people on my Facebook are in the book business. And I think it was like 65% of them had bought their books on Amazon. That's huge. That's more than the majority. That's, and if you're not there, a lot of people will automatically go to Amazon to get a book. And then with their with the Kindle Unlimited, people who've opted into that can read your book without actually buying the book, but you get paid for the pages that people read. So all of my books, I have 15 books. They're all through Amazon, except my hardcover book, my hardcover children's book, that's through Ingram Spark. And that's only because Amazon doesn't do hardcover books that are less than 75 pages. And children's books are normally between 40 and 50 pages. So if you want the readership, you're limiting yourself. If everybody who buys your book has to get it directly from you, you're really limiting your audience. That's really, so you have to weigh the pros and cons of everything that you do.
That's right. That's so true.
Yeah. So what attracted you? Oh, I'm sorry. You can go first.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was just going to ask what attracted you to Black Odyssey, because I know it's a great publishing company and Entice is amazing, but what made you decide to go that route?
It's actually, I don't know if you know Shakir Rashan.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we were in a group and we were discussing some things, and he brought up the fact that Black Odyssey was now open and that they were looking for people to publish. And he encouraged me to submit, to do a submission and to send it in. And I said, yes. It was as simple as that. Because he knew the publisher as well, so if he can vouch for them, I mean, I'm good with them. So yeah.
Yes.
That's all it was.
Well, they're really making a mark, and Entice goes around to different retail outlets. Like, she'll go to Target or Walmart to see if the books are on the shelves, and she'll take a picture and post it. I think her agreement is through Kensington, but she has the independents, and they're doing the distribution, which is the main benefit that you really get from being with a big publisher is distribution. And what that means is the book is basically going to be available just about everywhere on the shelf in different places, not just on where a person can go in and order it and then get it. You don't get the browsers when you don't get people who just go into a bookstore and browse. You don't get those people. Or like at the airport where people will browse and pick up a book. You don't get those people if you don't have the distribution. So that's one real benefit of being with the bigger publisher. So what have you been doing today, since today is release day? How have you spent your day?
Well, today was an office day for me. I work some days at home, some days at the office. And so I was scheduling everything from yesterday and the day before and so on. So for me, it was just basically kind of tipping in and just, telling people thanks. And, because I have a group of writing friends who would have shared the book on their pages and so on. So it's just been basically just thanking people for sharing the book. And I'm new on TikTok, so I went on there and I did a thing. This is the thing. This is the thing with being an author too. You don't have to be on every platform, but it certainly gets your name out there. When as in the various places that you are.
Right.
So,
every platform has a different audience. So you could be hitting the same people, or you could be hitting different people. You never know.
Yes. Yeah.
That's very true.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not on TikTok yet, although I see reels from TikTok, but
I do as
I'm
well.
I'm not on there yet as far as like having a page or whatever. I have to look at what other people are doing on there. I hear about BookTok, and people are saying, people are selling a lot of books, which is basically selling books on TikTok. It's kind of like Black Twitter. It's just a thing. It's like a community, sort of, so to speak. But I do recognize that it's an area that's hot right now. Things are hot for a while, and sometimes they get cold. Sometimes they stay hot, but Facebook was hot when it first came out, and then Instagram was super hot when it came out, and now Twitter. I think Twitter and Facebook came out around the same time or something. Twitter's evolving into a different animal.
Right.
But
a place I kind of don't understand anymore.
Yeah, well, I hadn't been on Twitter in like 5 years because for me, Twitter just started to be a place where people would say mean things because of the character limit. They would they had a limited amount of characters they could post, and they would always be mean. So I quit posting there 5 years ago before even the switch. So, but it's good to be. So when you went on TikTok, what did you do? Did you do like your own video talking about your book? Is that what you did?
I did. I posted a video about the book, and then I posted me doing a teeny tiny reading. And then this evening now I posted about the fact that it was release day.
Okay.
The fact that my husband was questioning what was going on in my mind when I was writing that book.
Well, today's also a special day because it's the day that you kick off your tour. The Silver Daggers tour.
It's a blog tour for the book. I mean, basically, I want to do everything I can to get this book out there, to make people aware of it. And so that's just one component of what I'm doing, but I'm kind of moving in stages so that I know what's working and what's getting sales and what isn't. So, if I take it a little bit at a time, I kind of have a better idea of what's what and what works and what doesn't work. So,
okay. Yeah. Well, we're close to the end of our time. I had one last question before we have you show the cover again and tell people to rush and go get it. Is the setting for all of your books Jamaica or the Caribbean or the islands? Is that like the thing that you do, or do you do different settings?
Different settings, but there's always something in there about Jamaica, whether it's the food, whether it's the culture, whether it's the people. There's always something in Jamaica. But like this book, it starts off in Jamaica and then it goes to Miami, and that's where most of the story takes place.
Okay.
Well, and I see you're also doing a giveaway. So I put the link to your Amazon page for Flames of Wrath in the chat, but I also put the link to your raffle in the chat. So anybody who purchases the book can take part in the raffle. Is that correct?
Yeah, anybody can take part, whether you purchase or you don't purchase. It's everybody. So yeah.
Okay, y'all. So let's get out there and support Miss J.L. Campbell.
Hey.
Okay. Well, congratulations again on your book release date. Show your cover one more time.
And thank you, ladies, so much for having me. I so appreciate you. Yeah, so get this book. I can't exactly tell you all that's between the covers, except to say that the leading lady, you're never going to meet another character like her. So
I like it.
Ori, get that book.
And great cover, by the way.
Yes, it's a beautiful cover.
So thank you so much for being on the show. Congratulations on your release day. And we will be supporting.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate two of you.
And have a great one.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. So that was J.L. Campbell, and she just released her brand new book, Flames of Wrath. So before we bring on our next guest, I do want to let people know what we have a special giveaway this week. This is a three volume set produced by Chuck D. It's a novel set called Studio, and he has a play on words. It's not spelled the traditional way, but there are 3 books in this, and I'm just going to show it quickly because when we do the trivia, I don't want to do that, but somebody gets to win that 3-book set. So we're going to bring on our next guest, and our next guest is Jessica Pryde. She's an author and she's a book blogger. And when she comes on camera, I'm going to let her know how we became aware of her and invited her to the show. So, Jessica, welcome to Black Authors Matter TV. And let's unmute so we can hear you.
There we go.
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And
Thank
where
you for
are you
being here.
Where are you joining us from?
I currently live in Tucson, Arizona.
Tucson, that's where my dad lives.
Oh, come visit anytime.
I got you, girl. Next time I come visit my dad, I'm gonna call you.
Yeah, I've been through there. We were on a road trip a couple of years ago from Houston to San Diego and back. And so we went through Arizona, I-10 and I-40. It's a beautiful state. All different sizes and types of cacti.
And it's hot there too.
It is very, very hot, very, very hot. But it's very beautiful. It's different kind of topography than you get in the region that I live in, which is Houston, the Gulf, or the East Coast. The Arizona, New Mexico area is just totally different from the rest of the country. So it's very beautiful. So is that where you're from originally?
I am actually from DC, and I do miss seasons every once in a while.
Yeah. Well, that's it's a small world. I went to college in DC, so a lot of people go. It used to be Chocolate City. I hear it's not as chocolate as it used to be. So
yeah, I hear it's closer to cappuccino now.
Yeah. I heard the same thing. So, Jessica, the way that we became aware of you was there was an article on Book Riot about African American romance, historical romance, decade by decade. And the author of the article, which is, let me see the name, is Anika Klein, mentioned that you led her in the direction of doing something specifically about African American romance historically from decade to decade. So, and they had a list of books they started in the 1900s and different books in different decades. And so that was how we became aware of you. I said, well, if she's on the pulse of things like that, we need to have her on the show.
So historical romance is your jam.
Romance is my jam, and historical, contemporary, fantasy, whatever it is. If there are people falling in love, I'm all for it. Well, falling in love and staying there.
Well,
Okay.
if you remember the story, what was the name of the movie? I forgot the name of the movie. But remember in the movie, she asked, when did you fall in love with hip hop? So I'm going to ask you, when did you fall in love with romance?
Way too early. I grew up around my mother reading romance novels, so I would peek over her shoulder and then eventually slide into her bookshelves and pull them off. And then I took a break for college and stuff. And then after I went to library school, and after that, I sort of fell back into reading romance, and I've sort of been there ever since.
You know, my mom used to read romances too. She would read historical My mother was a reader like me. Well, I'm like her. I have to put it like that because my mother was always reading a book. Like after dinner, after everything settled down, before bedtime, she was always reading a book. And she read romances. A lot of them were historical, and a lot of them were just contemporary. And I don't know if I ever read them. I don't think so. I used to read books on my own, but she loved them. And it's a wide audience for romance.
It is. Yeah,
Yeah. I
there are
think
a lot
some
more too.
people write romance. Some people write what they live.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, Brenda Jackson says she writes what she experienced with growing up with her high school sweetheart, and she married him. She met him when she was 15 or 14, I think she said. And so he's passed away. But she says she lived the romance. But a lot of women read romance vicariously to experience it, I'll say. Um, and this just makes you feel good if you did the boy meets girl story and they get
Well,
together.
that kind of leads to what I was going to ask. Most people who are romance fans, they feel that romance has to have a certain formula. If the book does not fall into that formula, it's not a real romance novel. Is that the way you feel about romance, or do you have a more general view of it?
I'd say that I'm not quite as strict about formula, but it does have to have a central love story and a happily ever after. If the people who fall in love don't end up together at the end, somebody dies, somebody leaves, something happens, then that's not really a romance, right? But anything else, as long as those two things are there, then I would call that a romance. Some people are like, it has to follow these beats, or it's not really.
Right.
But I just want people falling in love and staying that way.
Yeah, and what I've seen, the ones that are pretty strict on that formula, boy meets girl, girl can't stand boy. Some kind of way, boy and girl wind up falling in love. Then there's some huge conflict that tears them apart, but they find their way right back together and they end up happily ever after.
Yeah,
I like those stories though,
Oh, yeah, those are some of the best.
Yeah. Sometimes you just want to relax with the story. You don't want to have to think too hard on it. You just want to root for the couple, and I'm cool with that.
Yeah, a lot of people like romance isn't my genre. That I read hardly, but it has I respect it because it has a huge audience. People who write romances, they might write 3 or 4 books a year. That takes a lot of imagination and effort. That's a lot of stories. That's a lot of plots, a lot of characters. That's a lot of work. And now you write romance yourself.
I have a few on the side that haven't been published yet. I mostly write about romance though.
Okay, so your blog, what's the name? What's your blog, the title of your blog?
The title of my blog. Do I have a blog?
Do you have a title?
So sorry, I confused myself because sometimes I forget that I have a blog. I named it Black Love Matters after the book that I wrote, which is also called Black Love Matters.
Okay, I've seen that cover.
Yeah, it's an essay collection. So I didn't write the whole thing.
Okay.
but it features several authors and readers of romance talking about the Black experience in romance. And I started a blog to sort of bring to light some lesser known Black romances as I was reading them. And I fell off on it a little bit. I need to pick back up, and I hope to be able to do that this winter season.
Okay, well, I wanted to find out about the book.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead first.
Is the Black Love Matters book, is it romance stories, or is it people writing about romance, Black romance stories? Do you understand?
It's people writing about romance. So, for instance, Beverly Jenkins was kind enough to accept my invitation to contribute to it. And she wrote basically a brief history of African American romance from the 1850s to present day. And people have essays about what it was like to be queer, looking for Black love stories, what it was like to write Black heroes who weren't the norm. And interestingly, after your conversation with J.L. Campbell about indie romance, Christina C. Jones wrote a great essay that I made the mic drop of the book at the end about being an indie Black romance author and working with other indies to sort of be the baddest girl in the room. So it's a whole
baddest girl
of essays.
I like that. The baddest girl in the room.
Mm-hmm. Christina Jones, is she the author that is a doctor? Is that the one I'm getting mixed up with somebody else? Is she a medical doctor?
I don't think she is. I think she writes full time.
Okay.
I'll have to see who is.
Look her up, because I think I'm thinking of another doctor. But that's an interesting angle in terms of people writing about romance instead of writing romance.
Mm-hmm.
Those essays would be. Now, did you contribute an essay to the book?
I did. I wrote about how interracial romance is sort of getting to be the norm when maybe it shouldn't be.
I think as time goes on, romance is just starting to look more and more different.
Mm-hmm.
We have interracial, then we also have LGBTQ romance. So we're going to probably start seeing a lot more of that romance, and they're all going to have their own audience. I think we had someone on the show who only writes interracial romance books.
Yeah, we did. Was that the author? I can't think of her name, but
I can't remember her name.
Her husband was white.
Yes.
I can't remember who it was. You're making me go back and look. Hold on, I'm gonna look at my book and find it.
She did have a white husband, and she wanted to write stories that reflected her relationship, so she only wrote interracial romance.
Yeah, and
I guess there's an audience.
I have one of those too. He's down the hall watching sports or something, but so I totally I love being able to see that. It just seems like that's there are more interracial romances than Black romances, when we know that that's not what
at
least American demographics look like. Or at least it feels like the interracial ones are the ones that are getting more marketing, or at least they were in 2022. But
in the commercials, especially, it's really more than 50-50. If there's a Black person, they are not necessarily going to be with a Black person, be it male or female, either way. But especially Black men in commercials.
Well, I almost like that, because I remember growing up watching the soap operas. Yeah, I say growing up watching the soap operas, because my mama was watching it, my grandmother was watching it, I was watching it too. I got into it. But if you remember, there was always one Black couple. They could never break up. And if they did break up, they brought another Black person on the show.
Mhm. Mhm.
You know, that's funny, but true.
Mhm.
I'm trying to find who that was, and I can't right now. I'm
Yeah,
looking
I
at.
don't remember her name, but I just remember, and she said that was
Oh,
those
here
were
she
the only
is.
romances. You found her?
Tracy Livesey, wasn't that her? It was Tracy.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You know who we're talking about?
Yeah, I've
Yes.
read some of her books. I think I have all of her books, but I haven't read them all yet.
Okay.
You know,
She said
sounds like a true reader. We have the books. We haven't always
that's
read them.
true. That is true. But she said that the not every interracial couple has to be based on. She wanted just to have normal people meeting and getting to know each other and liking each other instead of it having to have some component with a racial struggle or a
Right.
movement or
They're just two people who happen to fall in love, and they didn't have to overcome racial barriers to get there.
Right.
They just had something in common, and there was a connection, a love connection. So now you have a lot of books on your shelf there behind you.
I do. This is my keeper shelf.
Okay.
Oh, that's your keeper. Oh, so you don't keep every book that you read?
I don't. That would
Do
be.
you do giveaways on the blog, maybe?
I could, but I don't right now because, like I said, I sort of fell behind on everything. I do run a local romance book club that I often give books to when we meet in every month.
Nice.
But
Okay.
giveaways, I will have to plan some giveaways in the future.
Now, is your book club interracial, or is it okay? So interesting. So how when you all get together and meet and talk about romances, how are those conversations? Like, what's something about those conversations that could be different or interesting that we might, if we were like a fly on the wall?
Those conversations can get rowdy. We instead of talking about a specific book, since there are so many romances, we have meetings by trope. So for instance, we might have a whole conversation about books that have an only one bed trope. So every book that we talk about has had some instance where the story was moved forward by the main characters having to share a room that has one bed, whether they end up sharing the bed, one of them sleeps on the floor, whatever. So that was just one of the examples. We've had some much broader types of conversation, but those talks can be about how the anything from how the books actually are written to whether or not we believe the chemistry in the books, to whether or not the spicy times are actually like interesting and satisfying in the books. So when I say they can get a little rowdy,
I'm kind of with you on those last 2 points. I don't like it when the couples fall in love because the author said, okay, it's time for them to fall in love. They were just arguing or they didn't really know each other, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're in love. And I'm like, okay, can I go on this journey with you? This journey to love. How did you fall in love so quickly? And I think sometimes that's what bothers me about some romance novels, is they don't give us an opportunity to go through that journey with them so we can actually care about the couple. I want to believe that they're in love.
Yeah. I was having a conversation recently about how some books now, whether traditional or indie published, are more about what the topic is and what the beats are and the tropes are than the actual way that the story flows. So yeah, it's like the author says that they're falling in love, but really they just gave us one bed and a snowstorm and said they're going to be stuck together and eventually they're going to be together.
I never really thought about that one bed thing.
Now I can't stop thinking about the one bed.
Yeah, every time I read a book, I'm going to think about you, and I'm going to say, "Oh, there it is, one bed again."
Yeah, I didn't even know that there were tropes, romance tropes. So this is, well, tropes is kind of a newer term that is being used more and more just in general. But I never thought about there being tropes in romance, but just, it's interesting. I think about the plot being generally the same, but I never thought about tropes. So that's really interesting. And it's an interesting angle for a book club, especially one that specializes in one genre like that.
Right.
Yeah, because then people can say, well, we're talking about enemies to lovers romances this time. I hate enemies to lovers, or I love enemies to lovers. Why do you hate it? Why do you love it? What's interesting about it? What aggravates you about it? And those kinds of conversations can happen too.
Yeah, I just finished reading a book about this couple. They were supposedly enemies, couldn't stand each other. And then all of a sudden they fell in love. And I was like, wait a minute, when did they fall in love?
All of a sudden, click.
Yeah, I wonder how common that actually is. That two enemies fall in love. I wonder in the real life how common is it?
But they say there's a thin line between love and hate.
Yeah,
And
but I think
it just
this
so happened in the book
after they fall in love and something goes on.
Well, it just so happens in the book that I was reading that both of them were very attractive, and they couldn't stop noticing how attractive each other.
So one, it was a race to see who was in the mirror the most. Or
No, they were attracted to each other, and they, I can't stand him, but he looks good.
I hate the fact that I love looking at him.
Right.
Well, in a romance, everybody's attractive. Isn't that true? I mean, more or less.
More or less. And people are writing books that have like more like regular looking people, I guess you call it. More guys with dad bods and people with different kinds of bodies, but they're always beautiful no matter what.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
So when are you writing your love story? I know you said you wrote some books and you put them to the side. When are we going to see your book?
Well, I've got a couple that I'm drafting and revisiting every once in a while. And I actually do have a short story that is a romance that's coming out in a collection called Something Generous next year. It's with a new small press that's focused on uplifting the voices of BIPOC, queer, and disabled writers.
Nice.
It's Generous Press is the name of the press, and so their first anthology is called Something Generous.
And are they located in Arizona?
They are not. I'm not sure where they are centrally located. Everything that all the work I've done with them has been online.
That goes to show you how small our world is getting. You don't have to be in the same city as your publisher, your publicist. Your whole team can be all over the country.
Yeah, all over. and I can attest to that. Even with this show, everybody's in location. Although the media manager is in town.
That's good to have.
But that is the beauty of being able to pull a team together of talented people. They can be anywhere, and so that's helpful.
Yeah.
So when you came to the attention of the writer, did they seek you out? Did you bring the historical fiction angle to their attention with the different decades, or did they seek you out? How did that transpire?
I actually also write for Book Riot. I probably should have mentioned that at the beginning. So I think when Annika was writing that list, she did a little bit of crowdsourcing with other Book Riot writers, asking about specific titles. And I think I mentioned the Decades series because it is such an ideal historical romance series where one person just writes a specific decade, and all the way through the 20th century. So I mentioned those to her when she was writing a different historical fiction list, and then she decided to separate those out into discussing.
Yeah, a lot of times, if we don't have a list that's specifically with African American literature, we won't get mentioned. Like
Right.
the general list, somehow we get overlooked. And then they might bring in one, just so they'll, if they look at it and say, okay, this is a very non-inclusive list. Let's add one person. So they'll have one person in there. But a lot of times we need to have our own list just to give people the recognition that they otherwise would not get.
That's the challenge. And you're right that if they say just pick 10 authors, often Black people will not be included in those 10 authors unless we specifically say 10 Black authors. Or if the Black author is super, super famous, like they might say something like Maya Angelou, something like that.
Right. Or Toni Morrison,
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
one thing that is good about Book Riot is that they really do try to like diversify their lists as much as possible.
That's good.
Yeah, so I think it's almost a requirement, I think, to make sure that if you're writing about something, you have authors of color and books about people of color to write about, even if it's not specifically Black authors. But
well, we have a number of authors who watch this show. From your experience, what would be your advice to someone who would want to get the attention of a Book Riot?
Book Riot, there are a lot of people who write for Book Riot. So I would say, depending on what you specifically write about, look and see who's writing about that, because I think Book Riot has about 200 contributors now. And if there's something that really resonates with you, that they've written, reach out to them. And, I can't guarantee that you're always going to hear back. And
you won't hear back if you don't call or if you don't write to them.
Right. But definitely like find people in your wheelhouse. Like I said, we talk about how I'm a romance person, and publicists have reached out to me about war memoirs and things like that, and I'm like, what made you think that I want to write about war memoirs? But
that's true. You specifically have said, I mean, and everything that you talk about is about romance. So yeah, and it's good to specialize in something, especially something you enjoy.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, Jessica, we're at the end of our time. We want you to show your book again.
Absolutely. Black Love Matters.
Black Love Matters. And it's a collection of essays about Black romances. And Jessica, your work can be found at bookriot.com, correct?
It can. Bookriot.com.
Okay, and it's riot like a riot, RIOT, Book Riot. And you can find out more about her and follow her work there. And we'll be on the lookout for your release of a romance in the future.
Thank you. Thank you again for having me. It was great talking with both of you.
Okay. Well, it was great talking with you as well. It was great meeting you, and we'll be in touch. We're almost cousins now.
Yes, yes, we are.
Okay, have a great evening.
Thanks, you too.
Okay, good night. All right. So before we bring on our next guest, we're going to give away the book collection by Chuck D. It's called Studio, STEWD.
Y'all lucky. I can't participate in this one.
3-volume graphic novel set. And the trivia question for this set, and you get the whole set if you win. There's 3 books in the set. What is the exact title of volume 2 of the book set? So whoever gets that correct will get the book. We're going to check the answers. And after this next interview, we are going to give the set away. So our next guest is Peter Benjaminson. And Peter is an author of, Peter writes about Black entertainers from a historical perspective, and he's released several books along those lines. He'll tell you about some, I know he did one on Mary Wells and some other artists. And his latest book, though, is about the animated character Betty Boop and about her connection to African American entertainment historically. So, Peter, welcome to Black Authors Matter TV. Oh, you need to unmute your mic.
There we go.
Okay.
Much better.
Yeah, right. Yes, I could just sit here flapping my lips, but it wouldn't be that entertaining. Yes, listen, thanks very much for having me on the show in spite of my technological obsolescence.
Well, thank you for being here.
Okay.
Thank you. I know I mentioned Mary Wells, but name some of the other Black artists that you've written historical books about.
Well, I wrote the first book ever published in this country on the Motown Record Corporation. It was called The Story of Motown, which is pretty straightforward. And as I said, it was the first book ever. So I was the first to ever mention in book form all of the great Motown stars that had starred at Motown in the 60s and 70s. The book came out in 79, and then it was recently re-released in an updated edition by Rare Bird Books. It's available on Amazon.com. And I think since it was the first book, it didn't go quite as far as the other books, later books did. There have been 100 books since on Motown, but I was proud to have started it off. I mean, I was a reporter for the Detroit Free Press, and I realized that neither of the big papers in the city was giving Motown the coverage it deserved, and certainly the publishing industry wasn't. So that book was my attempt to write that scale. Then it did so well, I really got into the subject. I wrote the book called The Lost Supreme, The Life of Dream Girl Florence Ballard.
Oh, wow.
Which she asked me to co-author it with her. And that's exactly what I did. Although she died at age 32, I'm still splitting all the royalties with her daughters. So, that makes me feel good in the book because it's still selling. There's movie interest in it. And then I wrote a book about Mary Wells. None of these people had books written about them previously. So I think I was plowing a path, if that's the word, or making a road, making a road and then walking on it for all the people who wanted to learn more about the three of them. And then I wrote a book about Rick James called Super Freak, The Life of Rick James. And he was in Motown for a while. A more popular writer than I am, whose name I'm not even going to mention on the show, wrote a book that just barely beat mine in. And his David Ritz is his name. His book was better, I admit it, and he so. But so that answers your question, I think.
Well,
What else?
I think it's really interesting that you were able to connect with so many celebrities, and it seemed like they sought you out in certain ways to help them to write their books.
Well, Flo certainly did. You know, I was a reporter for the Detroit Free Press, and she had been unfairly kicked out of the Supremes and out of Motown. I went over to interview her. I did a big story on her. Then she called me up and said, you know, I like the story. Let's make it into a book. The other two, Rick and Mary, had died before I was able to write anything about them. But I saw the same kind of thing. Not enough people, in my humble opinion, were paying attention to them, and would really want to read books about their very interesting lives. That's the same feeling I had when I started on this Betty Boop book. She's been a character in cartoons for almost a century now, and there's no book except mine, The Life and Times of Betty Boop, that has ever been written about such a major character. There are plenty of books on other cartoon characters, but none on Betty. Tell me if I'm talking too much. I like to talk.
Oh, no,
No, not talking too much at all.
World. This is your world and your time. So
Okay.
I want to hear about what you're doing. I do have a question before we get into the Betty Boop book. I didn't realize you had roots in Detroit, which makes perfect sense with the Motown connection. Yeah. And when you were a reporter for the Detroit Free Press, was your focus on entertainment, or were you a general reporter, like just overall?
No, actually, I was mostly a city hall reporter. So this was odd, but I like music, and there's a lot of music going on in Detroit. Certainly at that time, there may well still be, but this was the big upsurge in the Motown record company. To be accurate, it had occurred just a few years before, in the 60s. I got there in the 70s. It was still going, but what was attractive to me was that there were many people around who had worked for Motown and had clear opinions about it on both sides, how good it was, how maybe what its failures were. So it looked like just a big gold mine to walk into it, extract stuff. And that's basically what I did.
Yeah, there was a documentary, I think it's called The Making of Motown, that's been on cable. I forgot which network. It's either Showtime. I don't think it's HBO, but it had Berry Gordy and Smokey Robinson talking throughout the documentary, and then they had the footage from when they first started Motown. It's really, really interesting how they did more than just make music. They were really on the cusp of change in the country. And when they work with their artists, they tried to find the right songs for them. But they also, I know there was a thing about, they would, with the Supremes and the, like Martha Reeves and the Vandellas and other groups, they got etiquette lessons because they were they were supposed to be classy and to really elevate their persona to really be fashionable and just very classy ladies. And so it was a overall, I guess that Motown took the artists and they did more than just write songs and sing them. They really fashioned their images, and a lot of them were very, very young.
Oh, they were terribly young.
Very, very young.
Yeah.
Most of them were minors. They had to have their mothers sign their contracts because you had to be 18 in Michigan to sign a binding contract. They weren't 18, so the mothers were older, of course, but they didn't know that much about the music business, and so a lot of the contracts were fairly one-sided. But nevertheless,
that left a lot of room for them to get taken advantage of because everybody was excited about being big stars, but they didn't understand the actual business of music.
That's it. No, I thought it was very interesting. We should get on the Betty Boop, but I thought it was very interesting that they combined black and white music. That was their real trick, or their real innovation, to put it in a better way. Black music and white music obviously have been around for centuries, but to combine them in an American situation was a work of great genius. I think it deserved to be written about as much as possible. And there are hundreds of books now about Motown. So,
Right.
Well, believe it or not, this is actually a good segue into Betty Boop.
Right.
And I've always loved the Betty Boop character. And I think I was much older before I really learned her story. And so I'm not going to try to tell the story. I want to turn that over to you. But I'm really glad that you wrote this book, because there are a lot of stories that are kind of swirling around about who Betty Boop really was.
Yes, that's a good point. Betty, well, one of the things that made Betty very popular, and I'll get into what you're saying in a minute, is that she started after World War I. That's when she became, she started in 1930, but her persona was based on the flappers. Those were women who probably weren't going to get married after World War I, because so many people, so many men had been killed. They became much more independent as women. They were called flappers because for some reason they wore winter boots like everybody else, but they left the tops of the boots open. So when they walked down the street, you could hear them coming. It's like they flapped.
Yes.
But they were very interested in progressing in life, even though they weren't married, or had children. And that's one of the things that Betty represents. She's had a long career now, as I said, almost a century. And she's had boyfriends. She seems to have had sex, although obviously it's not shown. It's implied. But she doesn't seem to have any children, and she certainly never got married, in spite of fighting off various men who wanted to marry her. So she represents the ideal, in a way, for many people, of an independent woman. That attracts both white and black people. The black link with Betty is, well, there are several of them. One is she was modeled on an actress named Helen Kane, who was a white woman who was a big star in the 1930s. And Helen had modeled herself on a couple of black entertainers, black female entertainers, who had perfected the scat thing. Yeah, it's where you use language that doesn't mean anything but adds a lot to your act. And they kept saying, boop boop we do, boop boop we do.
Yes.
Boop, boop, we do. And Helen was in a Harlem nightclub and watching one or two of these women do this, and she thought, this is a great idea. I can see why this is so popular. I mean, the nightclubs are full, people were applauding and stuff. So she made it into she was a Broadway star, and she used the whole boop boopy doop thing and her curly hair to get ahead of the theater world. And that's who Betty Boop was built on. She's a cartoon version of Helen Kane, but Helen Kane was a white version of the two or three black women who she saw live that she was trying to copy. It makes it a very interesting story. Actually, Helen eventually got PO'd that the Fleischers, the cartoonists, had modeled Betty Boop on her and were making a lot of money and getting very popular. So she sued the Fleischers in New York court. It was a big trial covered by all the papers, and she lost because the other side pointed out that she had stolen it from two black women. So you can't steal something and then say, oh, they stole it from me after I stole it. The law doesn't go for that. So she lost the suit, and Betty's been popular now for almost 100 years, because she's built on the basically genius of the black women who she imitated, and because the Fleischers, who ran the studio right here in New York, kept making her independent and a model for all women, or every woman who doesn't want to necessarily be required to get married, have kids, and stay home. That was Betty's secret, such as it was.
Okay.
So what's interesting to me, and I'm sorry, Gwen, but what's interesting to me that this was a white woman who kind of, I guess, modeled herself after the Black women that she saw, but the character, I've always thought the character looked Black.
Oh, maybe it's because of her. I don't think her
it wasn't so much about the skin. I think it was
The
hair. Yeah.
The hairstyle was like Dorothy Dandridge's hair and a couple of other women during the 50s, more during that time, where they would wear it was curly and close to the face. And that's a style that you see on, I guess it was on white women in like the early, like some of those silent movies, which I can't really watch, but they have a close hair, the hair close to their head and curly. But then in the 50s, Black women were wearing their hair like that as well.
Right. Well, it was a copy of Baby Esther. I just remembered her name. She was a black nightclub performer.
Yes.
You know, Helen Keynes, that's great look, great act. You know, and she made her hair up just like that. So it was a copy in the sense that she looked like her. You could argue that it's a ripoff. It was a ripoff. I guess it was a ripoff. But people, when I talk to people about that, I have to point out that, you know, well, it happened with rock and roll too. Black people invented rock and roll. Then Elvis started ripping them off, or excuse me, imitating them creatively. But then other people imitated him creatively too, and a whole new field opened. You know, it's not like you can say, I'm sorry, we only going to allow one person to do that. You know,
right?
No one else could do it. Then it spreads out. I mean, Beethoven imitated Mozart or whatever, and some of their music was probably similar. But still, the original Black women were successful. They were performing in Europe and in America, but they should have been given more credit. That's absolutely true.
And Florence Mills was the other Black woman.
Yes, thank you. Right. So that's one of the things that made Betty so popular, was that she was drawing, you know, she became a truly American figure. She drew races together in terms of what their preferred entertainers looked like. She's still around now, obviously. There's a musical that just opened in Chicago, which plans to come to New York. I hope they do, because I can go out and sell my books in front of the theater without, you know. Well, I have no shame, man. When the Motown movie came here, I forgot the name of it, but it's about Motown. They were going to call it The Story of Motown, but then they realized it was the same title as my book, so they changed the movie. I was selling books out in front of the theater. I mean, why not? We're all working together. We're all working the same gold mine together. Let's go for it. Just a thought.
I'm just picturing you doing this. I mean, did you set up a table, or did you walk up with a trench coat and say, "Got a book for you"?
Well, no, in this case, let me get to what I'm doing now. Betty is so popular. If you look on eBay, I think I looked this morning, there are 180,000 separate Betty Boop products available on eBay. The Fleischers lost the copyright some time ago, so anyone can make a Betty Boop jacket, skirt, hat, you know, doll. But the fact that there are 180,000 products, individual products available, shows how popular she is. You know, these people aren't making these things and putting them up because they want praise. They want to sell them to the other people, and obviously someone's buying them. Otherwise, they wouldn't go to this tremendous amount of trouble. So obviously, Betty means a lot.
Yes, she does.
Probably to women, because she represents such an independent, creative, and self-aware woman. The sort of the ideal American woman for several different races, I would think.
An independent woman who still made sure she looked good every time she left her house.
That's right. That's right. You know,
Never aged. She was always the same age. She never aged. So, but you know,
oh,
when things come back around, recycle in terms of popularity to a new generation, they see things from a different vantage point than the original intent. You
oh
know, it
yeah.
was like when Malcolm X, every so many years, Malcolm X really becomes popular again. He never completely wanes in popularity, but each new generation, they have a different take on it, or they see it as resistance. Malcolm X kind of symbolizes that for each generation. But then they'll have different clothes, different apparel, different symbols that they use. So you just never know. Now she also in the cartoons that Betty Boop was in, she had several Black bands, big bands.
Oh
So
yes.
tell us about that part.
Yeah, she sang a lot of songs, and other people in the cartoons also sang songs. And the she made arrangements to have various bands, Black bands, perform at the beginning of each cartoon. They'd perform one of their songs, and then in the cartoon, she'd do a sort of a cartoon based on another song that that same band had performed. So they got to do two songs in each cartoon, and they really loved it because the Fleischers, excuse me, who had arranged it so that the cartoons, which are very popular in the 30s, of course, there was no TV, so they're only shown in theaters, were shown during or just before a performance of the Black band that was featured in the cartoon. So like Betty would do a cartoon based on a Louis Armstrong composition or performance. He'd be in the cartoon, and then people would be told that Louis was going to play down the street, at some other theater. This increased revenues terrifically. I mean, again, with no TV, if you wanted to see a band, you had to go to a club or theater. So it was very good for them. On the other hand, they did engage, Betty, I should say, and her backers did sometimes engage in racial stereotypes. There was one particularly bad one where Louis Armstrong a couple of Betty and some of her pals went to Africa, were captured by cannibals, and they had Louis Armstrong's face. They gave him an African headdress and beads in his nose or whatever. It made him look like an African tribesman. It was very insulting. However, that was the only time they really screwed up on that. The rest of the time, they had the characters in non-racist poses, or non-racist roles. But you got to remember.
I remember seeing that picture.
Yeah. It's trying to remember the name of it. I can't, but you can find it easily. It's the only I think it's the only cartoon that Louis Armstrong and his band were in. But they went along with it. It was mild. They didn't actually say anything about him, and they were making tons of money from people rushing maybe the next day to see his concert down the street at some other theater. They shouldn't have done it, but
those were the signs of the times back then, though, right?
Thank you. That's just what I was going to say. I mean, the fact, you could say they were really advanced. They had Black and white people in the same cartoon, and the Blacks were treated as equals, in the cartoon. That certainly wasn't happening in the movies that they were showing at the same theaters. That was very rare. I'm not trying to excuse anything, but you got to realize it was a different era.
In the 1930s, that's almost 100 years ago. And a lot of, if you look at some of the films where Black people were at the time, they talked about how the roles that they were able to get were so limited because they generally were servants. Well, if it was historical, they were actually slaves, like Gone with the Wind. But then if it was a more contemporary at that time, they were still maids or chauffeurs or butlers, or just comedic sidekicks, so to speak, like Amos and Andy. So they would talk about it was very difficult to get roles that were beyond that.
Yes, that's true. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm just going to say
Oh.
one of the people that Betty really helped was Cab Calloway, who did, I think, one or two major cartoons with her. His band performed, on stage, and then his compositions were used in the cartoon section. And it was obviously made a cartoon version of him. So he went from being, filmed on the stage, and then he became a cartoon figure along interacting with Betty. There was a big one about they were all in a cave, and he was playing something, and ghosts would appear. It's a great cartoon. Like I say, you can see them all on YouTube. And the Fleischers must hate this because people are watching them in the millions and they don't get any money. It's because they lost the copyright some time ago. So I'd be pissed. They probably don't. Just a thought.
Well, I think copyrights, how long do they last? Is it 75 years? Is it, do you know?
I think
it's somewhere like that.
You're right, but you have to renew it after 38 years or something. And I think someone failed to do that.
Okay. Okay.
That's
well,
an
yeah, that was Cab Calloway, and then a band leader called Don Redman.
Yes.
Also in the cartoons, in the Betty Boop cartoons.
Yes, he made another Redman, Calloway, and Armstrong were the big three there, and they were all very pleased, apparently, to participate in the cartoons. I'm sure Armstrong didn't like being, stereotyped. But on the other hand, he got to sing one of his songs in the cartoon, which was, I'm sure it made it much more popular. He was a recording artist, and he sold it. So in any case, they went along with it. And 2 out of 3 times, Betty got it right. So that's something for those days. Just a thought.
Yeah. So the book was released, the Betty Boop book, November 15th. So what was that? About a week ago.
Yes, that's right. Yes. And to show what the interest is like in Betty Boop, the musical called Boop, the musical, which stars a black woman, by the way, which I think is very equitable.
The black woman is playing Betty Boop?
Yes. Yeah.
Interesting.
It opened on the 19th. So there was almost simultaneously a book on Betty and a musical about Betty. The first musical ever and the first book ever came out. I mean, it's probably the 100-year mark approaching that reminded people that there was, and the hundreds of thousands of products available showed how much people were interested in America in the cartoon and in the character. And she still represents an independent woman, which, not dragged down by having to, I don't know, work at a store and then come home and take care of the kids and then take care of the husband. She does none of that stuff. Well, maybe she worked in a store, but she tried to own the store. That was it. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. Well, for those who didn't know about the connection with Betty Boop and Black artists from the 1930s, your book will allow people to learn more about that, because that's like little known history that doesn't really get discussed.
Yes.
And when people think of Betty Boop, they probably don't know about Cab Calloway or Esther Jones or Florence Mills and their connection to her.
And I don't think they always think about the impact that she had on women, on the impact that she's had on popular culture. I mean, because just as you said earlier, there are what did you say, over 100,000 pieces of art with her likeness on it now,
or jackets or whatever.
Right.
Speaking of influence, Marilyn Monroe, she did a movie. I forgot the name of it, but she in the movie she did a terrific song in which she inserted the phrase "boop boop be doo" out of nowhere. It was like a tribute to Betty.
Something Like It Hot, I think.
Thank you. Something Like It Hot. That was it. Yeah. That's the one that had Jack Lemmon and some other guy dressed up as
Tony
women.
Curtis. Tony
Tony
Curtis.
Curtis, right.
I've seen it multiple times.
See you, Gwen. Go ahead, girl.
I want to be loved by you. That was the song.
That's it. Very good. That's it.
Multiple times. It's
I
really
mean,
a classic.
that was Marilyn's tribute to Betty and to Esther Jones too. So she's still carrying on. I mean, something about that is really grabbing people. I hadn't realized how big a grab that was until I started doing this research. She hit some vein or nerve somewhere, and a lot of people are reacting positively to it, in spite of sins that some of the racial sins the Fleischers might have committed.
Well, I am glad that you wrote this book, and hopefully it'll awaken a new love and respect for Betty Boop, and like I said, the impact that she's had on culture.
Thank you.
And that hopefully these two women who inspired the character Betty Boop will also get their due as well.
Yes, well, unfortunately, they're real women, so they're deceased. That's the luck of being a cartoon character.
Doesn't mean we can't remember who they are, though.
That's exactly right, and they're both covered to great extent in the book and how they influenced Betty. So if you're interested in that, I'd suggest you buy the book. And I'm not trying just to sell books. Okay, I am just trying to sell books, but
selling books. You're an author.
That's right.
We're on this show. We sell books. So
that's right. Yeah, you'll find descriptions of both those women and how Betty basically either stole from them or or took their stuff or lived on their reputations. However you want to look at it, it's all in the Betty Boop book, which is the first book ever written about her.
Okay, can you show us the cover one more time? We're at the end of our time. Okay, the life and times of Betty Boop.
Yeah.
By Peter Benjaminson.
The 100-year history of an animated icon, and it's only $19.95, which is actually low for a book. You can get it on Amazon or lots of bookstores.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Peter, for being a guest on Black Authors Matter TV, and continued success with your book on Betty Boop and your other work.
Thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity.
We enjoyed talking with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Get that book.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're gonna look at some of the videos from with Cab Calloway and Louis Armstrong playing in those cartoons. This is really interesting. So we're going to bring on our next guest, our final guest, but for the 3-volume graphic novel by Chuck D called Studio, the winner is Curtis Steverson, I believe.
It is Curtis Steverson.
Okay, so Curtis, you win the whole set, and it will be on its way to you in a day or two. So our final guest is Ruthie Goss-Robinson. Oh, Goss, I'm sorry. Ruthie
Goss-Robinson.
I got carried away with alliteration. So Ruthie has a new book out called, well, it's a memoir, I believe, and it's called 19 Years to Sunset. So we welcome Ruthie to Black Authors Matter TV.
Hi, Ruthie. Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Awesome.
Okay.
I've got to tell you before we get started, I know you were turning the camera toward you, but it looks so cool because as Gwen was saying your name, it looked like your camera was zooming in.
It actually does that.
Really?
Yes, it does that.
That was so cool looking.
Okay. Well, Ruthie, welcome to the show and congratulations on your book.
Thank you.
It is a memoir, understanding from what my research told me.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I'm telling my life story, my testimony. about how a season of my life that I was once married to a narcissist, and just what that entailed for my children and myself.
And 19 Years to Sunset, what does that signify? Why that title?
19 Years to Sunset, it was the name actually was given to me after I got out of the marriage. We were together for 22 years, married for 19 years. And when I left in 2018, just starting my life over, I had my grandson, trying to navigate my way to get through things. I was sitting in my apartment, and I had to first forgive myself because of everything that I had gone through. And then just dealing with it, I had to forgive the narcissist as well. And so during that time of just dealing with it and allowing God to start the healing process, I cried. I did everything, because when you're going through anything in life, sometimes it weighs heavy on you. And so I had my grandson, and so we went out and we sat on the balcony. And as I was sitting there, I looked up and I was like, oh, the sun is setting. And within that moment, I really understood, I enjoyed the beauty of the sunset. I've seen sunsets before, and it was just the Holy Spirit was like 19 years to sunset. Now, I knew within that moment that now it was going to be peace. Every time that I seen the sunset or I had the opportunity to see a sunset, it was going to be peace now. And so hence the name, 19 Years to Sunset.
That's beautiful.
That's really, that title, that's why I had to look it up, because it could be a novel. That's a good name for a movie, or
absolutely. Look, I speak it into existence.
And so yes. I had to look it up to see. And I originally thought it was a novel. So when I did research, I saw that it was a memoir. I said, okay, well, so that 19 years has significance. And
it does.
And sunsets are very calming and peaceful when you see
them. Absolutely. Absolutely.
It really just gives you an appreciation for God. And I tell people, when I travel, especially when I've done road trips and travel just within the United States, which I really encourage people to do, because it's so many different parts of the United States. But God can paint a landscape. His painting, his paintbrush, man can't match it. It's no. I recently went to Alaska and on a cruise, but then we did a tour in Juneau and some other parts of Alaska. It's just especially when a large swath of land is basically untouched. It's not a lot of development there. So the trees are still there, the lakes are still there, the mountains are still there. It's really, you really get to see God's handiwork, and it's just beautiful.
It is absolutely.
So how did you when did you come to the realization that you needed to move in a different direction?
As far as writing
in
my
your
book?
Marriage, like no.
Oh, in the marriage?
Marriage.
Well,
right.
it was and I can say probably as for a lot of women that have gone through and experienced the same thing that I did, it was years prior, but just a lot of situations when you're dealing with the fear of it and you're trying to navigate and you don't know how to start over. Years prior to that, it was just the wanting to do it, but you're scared and you're fearful. Yeah. But for me, my grandson was the turning point, which life happens. And so when God blessed me with my grandson, he and his father, they were living out in Las Vegas. And so when I had the opportunity to get him, to bring him in to live with me and my ex-husband during the time, I had made up my mind that I was not going to raise my grandson under the same environment that my son and my daughter went through. So my grandson was my driving force. And I tell people, and even in my book, I write it, and I tell the story of how during that season, when life was happening for my son, my ex knew about it and he kept those things from me. And so with my grandson, of course, being his father, it was just like, no, God gave me an opportunity to do it all over again, a second chance, but not the same way that his father was raised in the house. So he was my driving force. And I was like, by any means necessary, when I packed our bags, our clothes, and we left everything. So yes, ma'am.
Wow. So just going through this journey as you're writing the book, did you kind of talk to your family and let them know, I want to write this? And
no. I did not.
Because every time I think about a story like this, I always think back to that episode of Queen Sugar when Nova wrote her book, and the entire family was just so upset with her.
She spilled the beans on everybody.
She did. She didn't give them any warning.
And I understand that. And the reason why I did not tell anyone, family per se, not even my kids, until I was in the process of writing it, probably somewhere halfway through, and I would say, oh, I'm writing a little bit. For one, I didn't know myself at first that I was going to write it. But when God gave me the vision to write it, and just listening to the Holy Spirit, I knew that I needed to share my story. And it wasn't to bash my ex-husband, but to bring more awareness that was happening, and to awareness to families as well. And that's why I actually end the story. I know I'm jumping, but even in the ending of the story, and I say, family and friends, if you truly want to help us as we're going through, because you're on the outside looking in, help us by finding support groups. Do things to educate yourselves on, what's happening to people that have gone through this, because to us, it's just like we're mourning ourselves. We're mourning our own selves. It's like a death to us. So you can't tell a person how and when they should get over a death. Everyone mourns a death. Everyone mourns a death differently. So
everybody has a different process.
Exactly, a different process. And because it took me 19 years, it doesn't necessarily mean it will take the next person 19 years. And besides that, some people don't make it out at all,
You got a point there. I mean, that's deep.
Yeah.
It's deep, but it's real.
It is. It is. Absolutely.
So do you have custody of your grandson, or do you have him all the time? Are you raising him essentially?
Yes, my current husband and I, we're raising him now.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, at least you didn't give up on love.
I did not. And hence my second book, Life After the Sun Sets.
Okay.
Now when is that one due?
I'm still writing.
So you didn't let anything settle. You're like, okay, it's time to tell this second story.
Yes.
Well, that's good, because a lot of women who go through what you've gone through, they are one, they feel like they have so much baggage, but they also are not trusting. They have challenges trusting anyone again. And so a lot of times when a man comes your way after you've been through something. And it can be 1 year or 20 years or whatever the time period is.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times something really has to get your attention, for you to be open to it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Something about the person,
Absolutely.
that stands out, because it can be challenging trusting again.
It absolutely can. And I would tell anyone, woman or man, in that process, you first have to allow yourself to heal. And you have to be specific in what you're wanting, in your God-giving answers, asking God to heal you first, and to remove that baggage, so you're not carrying that baggage, and you're not punishing your new person for what you've gone through in your past. And so with that being said, I think, as with anything, it takes to be able to surrender that to God and allow him to, to move and give us what we need in life, and not us trying to make the decisions and just do anything out of our own, will, because we'll mess it up every time. So, but yeah, when you praying and you asking God to guide you and lead you and in the direction, then yeah, he'll lay the foundation. You just have to do the work.
And I don't want to sound like a devil's advocate, but I will say that sometimes that is easier said than done. Did
Absolutely.
where we're saying, okay, I'm not going to blame the new person for what the old person did, but then we wind up, sometimes we catch ourselves doing it without realizing it. Or, we're doing this without realizing it. And then when we catch it, by the time we catch it, sometimes the damage has been done.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also, with that being said, and no, you're not being the devil's advocate, I also wrote in my book that we have to also know the roles that we play.
Yeah.
Even in my former marriage, I understood the role that I played. And with that being said, meaning that the monster that I created, so to speak, that I had a hand in that, because in life we teach people how to treat us. Yes. And what we allow is sometimes what they get away with. At first certain things may be cute. Oh, he's just a little jealous, and then you like, oh, it's a little too much. He's serious, so when you teach people, or what you're going to allow, they're either gonna kind of get on board with it, or they will dismiss themselves, because if you're not allowing certain things head on, and you kind of put it out there on the table that it's going to be this way, or this is what I want, or if an instance arise and you can say, oh no, you talk about it first. No, that's not happening. I kind of did that. I've been through that. And so, no, I don't want that anymore. Or I just don't like that. Either they're going to, kind of go along with what you're saying because they really genuinely want to be in a relationship with you, or they're going to, move on.
Yeah.
It's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I caution people to pay attention to the red flags.
Exactly.
Before you say I do, because, and now people aren't necessarily saying I do as much as they're saying I do to move in, but either way, because once you're living together, that's on a different level than having separate dwellings.
Absolutely.
That's different. And then being married is different than just cohabitating. And this could be for a man or a woman, but as a woman, I know that we can be very nurturing, and we believe that we can help mold people, or
we're going to change
people.
Yes.
Until we realize we can't, but we will try to give the person the benefit of the doubt and think that we can change them. But people change if they want to change. They have to see that they need to change. And even if they see it, it's hard to change. It's hard for any person to really change. If you have habits or personality flaws or whatever, it's hard to change them.
Absolutely.
The more you do them, the more they get baked in. And so it's challenging and then we need to know the things that we want or need to have, and the things that we can't tolerate.
Right.
We need to know what those things are.
Absolutely. And that is so true. And it's it's profound for me in my book, because I said some of those exact things in writing and sharing my story. It's just simple as going back to what I said. We have to know and understand the roles that we play when we allow certain things. And for me, I think it took 19 years because I allowed the narcissist, and I played the role of allowing him to feel that I would never leave. No matter what was going on, I was not going anywhere. I was not gonna leave.
And then if you did leave, you would take him back.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. Yes. And so after that, every time that I did leave or threatened to, well, I didn't actually leave, but threatened to leave, it was just a cycle, a vicious cycle. And so that's why I say you have to understand and the role you play, and then kind of nip that in the bud first off, and just then start to navigate your way.
Well, what would your advice be to? Well, let me say this. Do you, and it's hard to regret something that happened, but do you regret that it took 19 years for you to make a decision? Or do you believe that the 19 years was something you needed to go through?
I don't regret it now. I did at first, and that was even before, like I said, before I was able to sit and go through the forgiveness process, because I had to forgive myself. I did at first, just to answer your question. And that was going through the process of me feeling like I was going to have a nervous breakdown and just praying about it. But once I forgave myself for staying for 19 years, I forgave myself for allowing, the things that I allowed and the role that I played. And then after that forgiveness, forgiving myself first, I had to verbally forgive the narcissist, forgive him. I didn't have to speak and hold a conversation with him to forgive him, but I had to release that from myself. And so once I released it from myself, that's when God began to move and began to turn things around. So my advice that I would give any woman or man that would be doing it, forgive yourself. Forgive yourself. No matter what. And even if you have to, it could be easier said than done, but you got to understand that we want forgiveness and we want grace and we want mercy. So forgive yourself, because you can't go back and change anything that happened. So you need to forgive yourself so you can move forward. And even if you wake up tomorrow and you're feeling bad, start all over again. Forgive yourself again. It's going to be a process.
Give yourself that grace that you
exactly give yourself.
Because God has forgiven us a long time ago. We just have to accept that He's forgiven us.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, that's part of when you're in a relationship that kind of pushes your self-esteem down.
It does.
It takes a while for you to forgive yourself, as you say, or trust yourself.
Yeah.
It took me, and I was only married 4 years to my one that was not, I don't know if he was a narcissist or not. He was just wrong for me.
Mhm.
But it took me a while to trust my own judgment.
Mhm.
You know, when it came to future men, you know, it you figure, you know, how did I not see? How did I miss it? How did I
Yeah.
make such a colossal mistake? And so it all of that is a process.
Mhm. It is. It absolutely is.
And you know, there's another tomorrow. You know, it's not the end of the world. You
That
know,
it's not. It's not that,
Mhm.
and it's not. That's why I say, if by chance, you know, you got to start again tomorrow. Tomorrow's a new day. You know, as long as you have breath and life, you know, flowing through your body, you get a chance to do it again.
Amen. Amen.
To do
And
it again.
are these some of the things that you address in the second book that you're working on now?
Absolutely, yes, yes, yes.
Good, good.
so when did
Because
your
it's
book
a
come
great
out?
message.
It is. When did your book come out?
The 19 Years to Sunset,
Yes.
Yes.
actually September.
Okay, so it's brand new,
Okay.
baby.
So, yeah, still
Yeah.
fairly
It's
new.
still brand
Yeah.
new. The first
Barely,
year is
yes,
still brand new.
yes.
That's great. So what have you been doing with the book in terms of letting people know about it, and what kind of feedback are you getting from people?
Facebook, of course. People within my job, people at church, TikTok, Instagram, those things. I haven't had a book signing yet, but just really word of mouth, family talking about it, and that's pretty much it.
Now, have
Well,
you had anybody ask you something that made you uncomfortable in during your your conversations and your presentations or talking to people about it?
No,
No, well, that's good.
no, and I think because I shared so much in the book. Um, and for me, you know, I can't speak for anyone else, and that just goes back to I don't have any guilt or any shame for anything that I've gone through. So no, nothing makes me uncomfortable in you know, regarding the book.
Well,
that's good that you because you seem like you went through the writing the book wasn't your healing process. It seems like it was a result of your healing
A
process. You already
result,
healed.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. You're absolutely correct. Yes, it
well,
was
some
a
people,
result
it's a
of my
catharsis.
healing.
Just writing the book is a catharsis where they're going, you know, they're going through the experience, and it helps them get through to the other side. But it sounds like you were already there, and then you decided to write the book.
Yes, I did. Uh, it, I didn't say I decided on my own, because if anyone would have told me that I would be writing, you know, a couple years ago that, hey, you're gonna write a book, I'll be like, oh no, that's not me. My mother was a writer. My grandmother was a writer. My mom was she wrote poetry. And so it just wasn't me, you know. By
Right.
no means, no one could have told me that I was gonna write a book. So, but here I am today.
About to write your second book.
I'm writing my second. Absolutely.
That's wonderful. But congratulations. And I guess congratulations basically all around, not just because you wrote the book, but because of the healing process that you went through, and to be willing to share your story, because you could wind up helping somebody else that you may never meet. They may just read your book and they're going to be helped because of something that you shared. And that's a very powerful thing.
Yes, yes. And that's part of the feedback that I have been getting. They've been saying that once they start reading, they want to continue reading because it draws them in. I had one lady, she told me, she was like, oh, I just thought it was better than a Lifetime movie. I was like, okay, well, thank you. I received it. I received that. So yes. And that's the goal. That's the goal. I just say, Lord, I thank you, you know, and I wanted to reach whoever it is supposed to reach. I wanted to reach them. Like I said earlier, he has laid the foundation. I just needed to do the work. So it will reach whoever God wants it to reach.
Amen. Amen. That's a great last word.
Yes. So Ruthie,
Thank you.
congratulations on 19 Years to Sunset. Show us your book cover one more time. And it's her memoir. And Ruthie Goss-Robinson, she has told her story, and it's going to help thousands of people. So thank you so much for being a guest on Black Authors Matter TV, and continued success, and congratulations on your new marriage.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night.
You
Best
too.
wishes
Thank
to
you. Thank you.
Okay, well, that's the end of our show for this week. And we'll be back next Tuesday for another episode of Black Authors Matter TV. I'm Gwen Richardson, your host, signing off.
And I'm Dr. Rhonda Lawson. Have a wonderful evening and a great week.
Thank you for tuning in, and join us next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern for another edition of Black Authors Matter TV.